There's mad noises going on outside, so just ignore. It's like neighbours don't know I'm filming a video or something. Rude. He's ready for this one, eh? I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in my Scottish Myths and Legends video. I'm not 100% sure, terrible memory, but I thought it deserved an entire video of its own. Just wait. I have a video about the Loch Ness Monster, one about UFO stories from Scotland, which is my favourite. Watch it if you haven't, it's so mad. One about Sonny Bean, Scotland's most famous cannibal. And also the Mackenzie poltergeist, which is an Edinburgh-based poltergeist that actually attacks people. And loads of paranormal investigation videos around some of Scotland's most haunted locations. But I thought we needed a haunted Scottish mountain video because that's what we're missing from the collection. So Ben Macdui is the highest mountain in the Cairngorms National Park and also the second highest mountain in Scotland after Ben Nevis, of course. It is a Munro, which is a mountain here that's over 3,000 feet. Ben Macdui stands at 1,309 metres, which is 4,295 feet, I think. Yeah, Ben Macdui is said to be haunted by Amphia Leamore, or as it's more commonly known, the Big Grey Man. So although Ben Nevis is the highest mountain in Scotland, Ben Macdui is said to be wilder than Ben Nevis. It's located in the centre of the Arctic-like Cairngorms Plateau. There's a description online that I really liked on biggreyman.co.uk which said, I'm going to read it, "The summit rises from the southern part of a huge sub-Arctic upland unique in the British Isles. It's a harsh environment where nothing grows save the hardiest of alpine plants. When the cloud rolls in, summits can be shrouded for days. In winter, the weak northern sun often does not penetrate the deep glens for weeks. At times like this, the featureless plateau is at its most elemental, grey above and below, the perfect environment for a big grey man." Ooh. Nobody's really sure what he or it is. There have been many alleged encounters with the creature, but very few people have seen it. It's said to be big, hence the name, thin, dark and hairy, with long arms and broad shoulders. So like, kind of like Bigfoot, I don't know, that's what I'm picturing in my head, but I don't know, that's just the description, but we don't know for sure what it actually looks like. Instead of actually seeing the creature, most encounters have been with strange noises, footsteps following them as they climb the mountain, just something lurking in the clouds and the fog. Before we get into the first sighting of the Big Grey Man, if you're new here, I'm Erin. I make videos about Scotland, the outdoors, sometimes periods, sometimes creepy things, sometimes mental health and life. Over 70% of people that watch my videos aren't subscribed, so click subscribe if you want. You don't have to, I won't force you, but the Big Grey Man might come after you if you don't, so just keep that in mind. The first recorded sighting of the Big Grey Man was in 1925 by J. Norman Cauley. He was a hiker and a professor, and he told the story of when he encountered the creature back in 1891 or something like that, so a few years prior. And this is what he said. "I was returning from the cairn on the summit in a mist when I began to think I heard something else than merely the noise of my own footsteps. Every few steps I took, I heard a crunch, and then another crunch, as if someone was walking after me, but taking steps 3 or 4 times the length of my own. I said to myself, this is all nonsense. I listened and heard it again, but could see nothing in the mist. As I walked on, and the eerie crunch sounded behind me, I was seized with terror and took to my heels, staggering blindly among the boulders for 4 or 5 miles nearly down to Rothiemurchus Forest. Whatever you make of it, I do not know, but there is something very queer about the top of Ben Macdui, and I will not go back there again." I would just like to say the word queer was used back then quite often, and a lot of the elderly people that I support in work still use the word queer to mean odd. So in that situation, that's what it means. It means there's something weird and odd about the mountain. So just in case you're wondering, it's not like a big gay mountain or anything, it's just, you know. So this encounter was then reported in the local press, and then other people were they then got the confidence to tell their experiences that they had with the Big Grey Man, because they were previously feared to tell these stories for fear of ridicule. And Cauley was a highly respected guy. I mean, he was a scientist, a professor, an experienced mountaineer, a fellow of the Royal Society, and he told his story on the 27th annual meeting of the Cairngorm Club. So his words had impact, you know. It's not as if he was some random that came out and was like, "Oh, I saw this big grey thing at the top of Ben Macdui." No, he was like a well-respected, intelligent man that people believed. Hugh D. Welsh said that he hiked the summit in 1904 with his brother, where throughout the day they heard slurring footsteps, as if someone was walking through water-saturated gravel. That was their explanation, very specific. And both felt frequently conscious of something near us, an eerie sense of apprehension. Bit weird. Phantom footsteps also spooked the leader of the Cairngorms RAF rescue team during World War II. Peter Densham, another person who knew the area really well, reported feeling overwhelmed with panic after hearing footsteps around him when he was surrounded by a heavy mist. Like lots of other people, he quickly descended, and he got a bit close to the cliff's edge and felt like this pressure. He felt as if something was like enticing him towards the edge of the cliff. He described it as a feeling as if something intangible was trying to send him over it. He said, "I tried to stop myself and I found it extremely difficult to do. It was as if someone were pushing me. I managed to deflect my course, but with great difficulty." And he also reported feeling a pressure around his neck. So what the hell was that? Right? What? Imagine being up the mountain and you're feeling this like thing, like something's pulling you towards the edge, as if you're like, no thanks. And Richard, one of his climber friends, wrote about feeling his sense of a presence, utterly abstract but intensely real. I like that description. He also heard an intensely high singing note, whatever that means, a few years later in 1948. He also reported one of his friend's encounters, and this friend wanted to remain anonymous, but he was camping on the mountain and he woke up feeling this inescapable feeling of dread, and he looked out of his tent to see a dark figure silhouetted by the moon on the summit of Ben Macdui. If I was on the top of that mountain and I saw that, I'd be away, man. I'd be, nah. Screw your sunrise, screw your cloud inversion in the morning, I'd be away. In 1958 there was an article in the Scots magazine about an encounter with the big grey man, and it was shared by mountaineer Alexander Chunion. I'm sorry. "I spent a 10-day leave climbing alone in the Cairngorms. One afternoon, just as I reached the summit cairn of Ben Macdui, mist swirled across the Larrig Grew and enveloped the mountain. The atmosphere became dark and oppressive. A fierce bitter wind whisked among the boulders, and an odd sound echoed through the mist. A loud footstep, it seemed, then another, and another. A strange shape loomed up, receded, came charging at me. Without hesitation, I whipped out the revolver and fired 3 times at the figure. When it still came on, I turned and hared down the path, reaching Glenderry, in a town that I've never bettered. You may ask, was it really the Fier Lea Moor? Frankly, I think it was. There's a book about climbing in Scotland called Always a Little Further by Alistair Borthwick, and it explains 2 accounts of encounters of people that he knew that had encounters with the big grey man, and this is what that said. So this is good. The first was alone, heading over Macdui for Carrour on a night when the snow had a hard, crisp crust through which his boots broke at every step. He reached the summit, and it was while he was descending the slopes which fall towards the Larrig that he heard footsteps behind him, footsteps not in the rhythm of his own, but occurring only once for every 3 steps he took. I felt a queer crinkly feeling in the back of my neck, he told me, but I said to myself, this is silly, there must be a reason for it. So I stopped, and the footsteps stopped, and I sat down and tried to reason it out. I could see nothing. There was a moon about somewhere, but the mist was fairly thick. The only thing I could make of it was that when my boots broke through the snow crust, they made some sort of echo. But then every step should have echoed, not just this regular 1 in 3. I was scared stiff. I got up and walked on, trying hard not to look behind me. I got down all right. The footsteps stopped 1,000 feet above the Larrig, and I didn't run. But if anything had so much as said boo behind me, I'd have been down to Carrour like a streak of lightning. The second man's experience was roughly similar. He was on Macdui and alone. He heard footsteps. He was climbing in daylight in summer, but so dense was the mist that he was working by compass, and visibility was almost as poor as it would have been at night. The footsteps he heard were made by something or someone trudging up the fine screes which decorated the upper parts of the mountain, a thing not extraordinary in itself, though the steps were only a few yards behind him, but exceedingly odd when the mist suddenly cleared and he could see no living thing on the mountain. At that point, devoid of cover of any kind. Did the steps follow yours exactly? I asked him. No, he said. That was the funny thing. They didn't. They were regular all right, but the queer thing was that they seemed to come once for every 2.5 steps I took. He thought it queerer still when I told him the other man's story. You see, he was long-legged and 6 feet tall, and the first man was only 5 feet 7. Once I was out with a search party in Macdui, and on the way down after an unsuccessful day, I asked some of the gamekeepers and stalkers who were with us what they thought of it all. They worked in Macdui, so they should know. Had they seen Fairlemore? Did he exist, or was it just a silly story? He looked at me for a few seconds and then one said, "We do not talk about that." Also, Scottish nationalist Wendy Wood was near the Larrig Grew hill pass when she heard a strange voice speaking what sounded like Gaelic, sort of carrying through the air. She later on said the voice had gigantic resonance. And she had a quick look about, but she couldn't see where the voice was coming from. And as she made her way back, she could hear footsteps behind her that seemed to be following her. At first, like the other people, she thought that they were echoes of her own footsteps, but quickly realised that they didn't match the rhythm of her footsteps. And she was terrified, and she fled the scene. These encounters aren't the only ones that have experienced the footsteps. Quite a lot of people have experienced hearing footsteps on that mountain, and also climbers have experienced a sort of ringing sound, or like a strange whining noise. Sudden feelings of terror or dread, and like Peter Densham, a feeling of something drawing them towards the edge of the cliff, almost like hypnotically. So lots of people have experienced quite similar things, haven't they? Like footsteps, noises, being drawn to the edge of the cliff, pressure, or just that feeling of not being alone somewhere. Like that's creepy in itself. Like the thought of being alone on a wintry mountain in a complete whiteout, not being able to see anything around you, but you can just feel that you're not alone. Just that feeling that someone else is lurking there, I don't like that. I would, no thanks. Quite a few people are spooked by this mountain, and it's like, there must be a reason why. Yeah, people do know the story, and if you know the story, you'll be thinking in your head, like in the back of your head, it'll maybe be there, but people that even have said that they don't believe in it and things like that, then they have had this strange experience. So it's like, what actually is the big grey man? What could the big grey man be? Explanations vary a lot. Like, some people just say that Scotland is a very spiritual place. It has lots of myths and legends, it has lots of creepy stories, ghosts, lots of dark history as well. And yeah, like people say that the mountain could just be like some sort of spiritual passing place, like a window between worlds, or like somewhere where something supernatural is actually happening. Who knows? Other explanations are, could it be some sort of Scottish Bigfoot, something that hasn't yet been discovered? It could, like, I think anything's possible. It could well be. Other reasons, the effects of high altitude, you know, like a lack of oxygen, people have become delusional. I know it's not as high as some other mountains that exist, but who knows, like, you can get disorientated as well when you're in a whiteout, like when there's nothing around you. That can be disorientating, so it could be a combination of that, like being disorientated, just imagining things, lack of oxygen. Like in such featureless flat-topped peaks, like I can imagine that it would become quite a bit strange. The reflection of people's shadows, like the Brocken Spectre. If you've never seen a Brocken Spectre, I've never seen a Brocken Spectre. I'm dying to see one. Like, I think they look amazing. It's a phenomenon that causes a shadow on the clouds, like on the direction that the sun's facing. It's like it casts your shadow, like a massive shadow in the distance, and people could mistake their own shadow possibly for the big grey man. But yeah, the Brocken Spectre has these what's it called, a glory, halo rings of coloured light surrounds the shadow. It's really cool looking, but people could be mistaking that for the big grey man, because if you're in a whiteout and you're like, you know, you're just surrounded by cloud and you suddenly see this big massive grey thing, you know, if you don't know what a Brocken Spectre is, like that would be quite scary. Also, I read a book called, I think it was called Magic Mountains or something, and it was talking about some of the Scottish mountains, and it described the wind and how the wind can sometimes make strange noises when it's like battering against certain things. So it could be just like the noise of the wind, I don't know, like the whole Gaelic voice and stuff like that. It's my dad whistling. Like, I've heard stories of people hearing bagpipes and stuff like that up mountains, and it's like the explanation for that was just the wind. You can hear people singing, just the wind. But in my head I'd be like, the wind can't do that. Like, I'd still greet. I'd be like, there's no way that's the wind. But then there are people that just want to, they don't believe in anything supernatural, so they're just like, ugh, must be the wind, you know, just obviously just the wind. Can't possibly be anything supernatural because it doesn't exist. What do you think it is? What do you think the big grey man is? Personally, I'm open to it. I'm open to everything, but like when it comes to stuff like that, I'd love to do the mountain one day, but it's obviously one that I'd need to do with people that are more experienced than me. I'm more of a fair weather walker, but you know, one day maybe, one day. I mean, I've never even been to the Cairngorms. Well, I went to Aviemore once when I was wee, but I don't remember it, so I'm not counting it. But I like to think there are some sort of supernatural beings that live in our mountains, why not? I could get behind it. But I'll link all the other videos that I mentioned down below, and please leave in the comments what you think that this thing is, because it's bloody weird, and it's weird. I have a Patreon page if you want to get involved with that. I'll put it down below and I'll put it here. I'm very active over on Twitter and Instagram if you want to get involved there as well. I've also got a TikTok now. Who am I? I only kind of upload older stuff. I don't film new stuff, but yeah, whatever. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.